Hi, this is Krishnadas. I cover the Supreme Court, and Sreeparna, my colleague, who covers the Election Commission of India, Aroon Deep, who does the tech for the Bureau, National Bureau. So we are here to discuss the Supreme Court judgment yesterday on the confirmation of the electronic voting machine system. Now, the Supreme Court over the years have been an ardent supporter of the electronic voting machine. But what stands out yesterday in the judgment is that the uniqueness comes from the petitioner's side. Now, unlike earlier cases, this time the petitioners went an extra step ahead and said that they wanted a revival of the paper ballot system, which was abandoned in the 1970s and the 80s. 82.
82 was the first time EVM was used in the assembly election in Kerala.
Yes. So for this, the main argument of the petitioners was that that a voter has a fundamental right to accuracy. He needs to know accurately the vote that he has cast, whether he has cast it to the right party. Now, they also said that, as usual, the EVMs are rigged, and there can be an insertion of malicious software. And they came up with several recommendations. One was the 100% cross-verification of the EVM vote count and the printed paper slips of the VVPAT, which is the voter verifiable paper audit trail, quite a mouthful. And then they also said that we are dealing here with the 3/4 of the electorate of this country is the rustic voter, and he needs to have physical access to the vote that he has cast. He needs to feel it, he needs to touch it, and he needs to fold it and put it in the sealed ballot box. So for that, he needs physical access. It's not enough for him to just push a button and see the printed paper through a lit screen on the VVPAT and then see it, probably not see it fall into the ballot box. So they said that for that, there can be 100% cross. So they came up with 3 or 4 suggestions. One was that the alternatives. One was that there should be 100% cross verification of the EVM vote count with the printed paper slips of the VVPAT. And he said that the petitioners, NGO Association for Democratic Reforms, represented by Prashant Bhushan and an individual, Rajagopal, they also said that 7 seconds for seeing the printed slip in the VVPAT pin code was just not enough for these voters. They needed more time. And also then came the argument for a revival of the paper ballot system. So these were the recommendations. This was the case that the petitioners brought. Now the EC, the Election Commission of India, fielded one of their best officers, and he was brought to court, and he was directly made to explain the EC stamp, which said that the EVM system was perfect. I'll hand it over to my colleague, Sreeparna, who will talk more about the EC. Do you think he's right?
So, Krishnadas, we have to look a little at the background of the fact that why were EVMs even considered in India? There are 2 aspects to this. The first very interesting thing is the first prototype of the EVM, the electronic voting machine, was displayed way back in 1977. Okay. And the chief concern during that time was booth capturing which was happening. The late 60s and early 70s, with the then decline of the Congress party, a lot of regional forces, and there was a lot of chaos in the voting mechanism. Now, EVMs were first even considered during that time. Then the second aspect is the mammoth scale of the Indian democratic exercise. Yeah. Like we have an electorate of 96.8 crore, that is 97 crore, and I think the Supreme Court only has said that the expenditure is something like 1 lakh crore in 24 elections. So, considering this, the Election Commission feels it is humanly impossible to do a ballot paper exercise in India at this time. Plus, we have a lot of cycles of elections, assembly, general, we all know what an Indian election is. Now, these are the 2 chief concerns. So, now the thing is, the opposition has really been, concerned about, has raised doubts over the EVMs again and again. In fact, the VVPAT for the first time were introduced in 2011 bases these doubts on that we need a mechanism to track what the votes are. Now, the concern has emerged to such a level that the Election Commission has been worried that it is affecting the voter turnout, for example. There's a voter apathy, and this time we have seen in both the phases the turnout has dropped. I wouldn't say drastically, but considerably. There has been a 4 to 5% drop in the turnout. So the CEC the Chief Election Commissioner, Rajiv Kumar, is so concerned that when he was announcing the election schedule, he devoted 10 minutes of his time just to explain, how you cannot doubt EVMs. And there were a lot of things he said. Some of the chief things was that courts, Supreme Court and High Courts including, have dismissed the doubts over EVMs 40 times in the past, right? So this becomes the 41st time that the Supreme Court has said EVMs are foolproof. And then he says that he reiterated again and again that they are 100% safe. There is no doubt over their, the safety mechanism, they are fair and security. And he also says that, he said that some social media experts have been creating doubts, which has really, concerned voters and opposition parties are latching on to this.
If I may interrupt there, the Supreme Court actually, from what you said, I'll just take a bit more and say that actually said that the petitioner's argument for a revival, for a return to the paper ballot system is totally inexplicable. Because as Sreeparna said, there was booth capturing, invalid voting, and this and such, and even went to the extent of casting doubts at the bona fide of the petitioner, in fact, an Association for Democratic Reforms, and it said that there are certain vested groups which have been at work to undermine the achievements of this great nation, which we have earned through hard work.
So if I might just add on to a little bit here, both sides have been quick to react. PM Modi, I think, has said yesterday that Supreme Court has validated our argument that EVMs are foolproof. Now, Congress party also has interestingly distanced itself. Jairam Ramesh has said, the Congress spokesperson, that we were not petitioners in the case. They have clarified that we were not there in the Supreme Court case. We were not involved. So, this was also to do with the fact that the Chief Election Commissioner has directly said that it is the opposition messaging which is problematic. So the opposition is also trying to, though they have distance itself, though they have really spoken about it earlier, so they are trying to distance itself. So, the Supreme Court has actually put a seal, rather, for the time being of this argument. Of course, there have been some changes which they have suggested from May 1st. If you would.
So I'll just go through before we move to Aroon and take you through the technology and the safety and why the EC considers the EVMs and VVPAT safe. Basically, what the Supreme Court said is that it said no to 100% cross verification of EVM and VVPAT counting. It said that yes, voters have a right to accuracy, voters have a fundamental right to information, but voters do not have the right to delay the electoral process. And they said, the VVPAT paper slips are sticky, they're soaked with chemicals. So counting them would be a really hard job. It takes a long time, isn't it?
Yes. It's just like the ballot paper counting thing.
Yes.
The manual counting would just be like ballot papers.
Yeah. And then they also said that the voter should not get physical access to the voting slips. That will cause further misuse. And finally, they said that the voters could 7 seconds to see your voter slip is just fine. It's just enough. And then, as Sreeparna said, there were certain directions. One of them was that fine. It helps the election commission to take it further on. Say that instead of manually counting your VVPAT slips whenever 5% random votes are
they are done now.
Yeah. So
interestingly, it was increased from 1% to 5% basis these concerns only.
Yes, and I believe that was also a Supreme Court
intervention.
So they said that why don't you try an electronic counting machine, like a tele machine, which will take you through the counting faster. And then the other thing was that which Aroon will explain more, is that the candidates can apply for if they feel that or they doubt, they suspect that there has been some tampering or some mismatch in the votes counted and the votes cast. then within 7 days of the electoral results, the announcement of the electoral results, they can apply and they can ask for an examination of the EVM microprocessors, the microcontrollers, and this will be done by a team of engineers from the manufacturers, the ECIL, the Electronic Corporation of India Limited, and the BEL. So they will come and do it, and the expenses have to be borne by the candidate, and in case
he's proved correct, then he'll be reimbursed.
Yeah. So that that's very interesting, that particular sentence. So the court actually says if there is evidence of tampering, then he'll be refunded. So is the court saying that tampering is possible after saying all these things?
I think the way trust has worked throughout this entire process, right? I mean, every step of the way we have seen that through candidates, through civil society, we've had some form of pushback against EVMs and VVPATs, or at least in the way that they're implemented here. I think one key thing to look at is how the security and trust of this is being established, right? So the Election Commission insists that the code of each EVM is burnt in and cannot be changed after a particular EVM is manufactured. And yet what we see is that they do not really disclose the source code that is used in each of these EVMs, and they say that, and the Supreme Court has validated this argument, saying that doing so would actually endanger the electoral process. So there is another kind of indicator that, okay, tampering at some level with some change in the process might become possible if it is not already, right? And so this is something called security by obscurity, which is that you have a closed system whose claim to security is that it is closed, right? And that not everyone has access to it. And a lot of open source software advocates push back against this logic by saying that, hey, if someone in particular, a bad actor, gets access and the rest of the world doesn't, and the bad actor finds loopholes or vulnerabilities that the entire community could have actually spotted and fixed in advance, then again, that's tampering, right? So these are some of the many concerns that kind of build up over time and result in kind of questions on the trust that we see validated again and again in other forums, like in the judiciary or within the Election Commission itself.
So the court says that there is a possibility for human error, but that the manual, the EC manual on VVPAT and EVM can deal with them. But what about arguments by the petitioner that the microcontrollers are one-time reprogrammable, and malicious software can be introduced through the symbol loading process to the VVPAT 15 days before the polling? So do you think that these arguments are feasible? I mean, is it possible that this can be done? And the court says that can't, but it's depending on the EC for its technology.
Absolutely. So let's also just kind of unpack that process, right? So the EVM is manufactured and it has a certain amount of source code, which kind of dictates how the logic of the entire machine works. And like you said, 15 days before polling, the election symbols are loaded onto the machine. What this means is that every button that's on the machine is linked to the party that it corresponds to. So if, let's say, button 1 is the Congress party, the 15 days before polling, the computer will kind of be connected to the machine and it will say that, okay, button 1 corresponds to this. And so the entire apparatus, absolutely, the laptop and the entire apparatus is kind of wired. And I'm hesitating to say program because they are
it's a dangerous word.
Yeah, it's a dangerous word here. But what essentially happening is that while there is a burnt-in microprocessor, there is also the components of the EVM that have to actually record the vote, and that is also electronic. It's not completely mechanical, right? And that is the kind of fundamental contradictions we are dealing with here. Is that we don't have that much visibility into the complete inner workings of these machines, and that in and of itself is both the argument against trusting in them and also the assurance that, okay, since this is so well safeguarded, we can trust them. Obviously, the ECI also says that you can trust in these machines because not only are they is their entire operating logic decided at manufacture and burnt in, and you cannot change the flash memory into which this code is burnt in.
What exactly is burnt in? I mean, that's a very
absolutely. So burning in memory is actually fairly common. So if you buy a CD, for instance, before in the early 2010s, and if it's a movie that you're buying, if it's a DVD, that is actually a piece of burnt-in memory. You cannot edit that DVD to kind of say something else, right? So that applies not just to flash memory like hard drives where you can delete your files and kind of delete. That also applies to processors, microprocessors, because they do need some form of memory to kind of store the code through which the entire system is run, right? So there also you have the option of making the memory updatable, or you can kind of burn it in, which is to say that once it comes out of the factory, it is physically impossible to alter that piece of code on that particular part of the flash memory of the microprocessor. You cannot really change it because it is burnt in. And when we say burnt in, it's actually burnt in, right? The laser that is used to burn in is different from the laser that is used to kind of write memory code, for instance, that can be erased and replaced with something else.
Sreeparna, why do you think that the code is basically saying that the paper ballot system is not possible? I mean, is it because the task is so huge?
The task is very huge. Like I mentioned earlier, India has a number of election cycles. There are assembly elections. I think every 6 months we have an election cycle. And the human part of it would be too much if you go to ballot papers. And that is one of the reasons why they have argued against manual counting of VVPAT also. So, ballot papers, when they were used, even when they were printed and before they were used for voting, they had to be scrutinized. So one scrutiny happens just after they are printed and before they are used for voting. Then the next happens after they are voted and counted. So this kind of effort is too much for an electorate of India's size. It will be too complicated. Plus, again, the Election Commission has argued again and again that EVMs have also helped smaller parties evolve. There are many independent candidates, so even if they're getting 10 votes, you can count them. So, basically also the court, at some level, both the court and the ECI, I would feel, also want to, there's too much concern about EVMs. If you look at this election cycle, almost everybody you encounter is talking of EVMs. And that 7-second thing, I think every voter is talking about it. Oh, we waited, we saw whether the person was pressing the button. So I think this is the kind of, it has led to an apathy, and this is what the Election Commission is concerned about, that the whole democratic process, which is a very hard-earned and, requires a lot of hard work to carry out, is, people are concerned about that because of EVMs, and they want to address that issue. And Supreme Court has, in a way, done well to try to put it at rest, though I don't know whether it will actually come to an end here. So, in a way, this is the major reason why Election Commission feels that, it needs to reiterate that no EVMs are safe. They are 100% safe. There is no doubt about that.
And we missed this part where, the Aroon also, where, they're saying that symbol loading units should be secured and stored. One of the directions is for the Supreme Court to be secured and stored along with the EVM VVPATs for 45 days. Do you think that this is a good measure for safety? Because the symbol loading unit is after all, this happens 15 days before polling and it's done with.
Absolutely, is that I think the key in storing these machines and keeping them locked away in strong rooms is to allow for audits to happen and to have scrutiny be an option, to give you policy room for scrutiny, right? So, while it's great that all the equipment that is used in conducting polling is accessible in a single place if questions are later raised, it's also worth asking, will it actually be audited, right? So if I'm using a simple loading machine to upload the BMP images, the bitmap images that represent the party's symbols.
What is bitmap images?
Yeah, the bitmap images is these are really small files that represent the logo of.
So they're not like loading software.
That's what the argument has been.
Right.
But again, the petitioners here have argued that this process of just uploading the images that are the empty slots in that software, that can be a kind of channel to load this malicious code, right? And having all this equipment be available for auditing or available for examination is one thing, but being able to convincingly and trustworthily actually examine them at a significant scale is what makes the difference, right? And it is not clear that even if this equipment is preserved, we will have the capability to have a trustworthy examination. And that also applies to something like barcode scanner, right? So now, I mean, the fundamental problem has been that these are machines that we don't really have that much visibility into as a public and as a civil society. And now we are adding another piece of equipment that potentially we don't really have visibility into, right? So again, this kind of gives us administrative safeguards that do have a dual function of increasing obscurity and also endangering transparency in civil society sites, and that's a contradiction that EVMs have kind of behaved with for a couple of decades.
Sreeparna, the thing is that the petitioner's case is that the voter should get physical access. Mm-hmm. Now the court has come up with the direction that you give political parties barcodes as one of the direction. So is it like moving away from what the petitioner said? I mean, is it like a battle, something else? I mean.
No, I think some parties have actually expressed satisfaction that the barcode thing has been, and then, but again,
from the voters' perspective.
But again, there have been doubts raised in social media, if we might use that word, that it becomes the same thing because barcode is also, I think it needs a scanner or something like that. So again, that issue of machines comes in. Whereas the petitioners, I think, if I'm not wrong, they just wanted a very physical and manual thing, something like a ballot paper or the VVPAT, hold it. Okay. So they are not very comfortable with any kind of machine or any kind of electronic intervention. But yes, some opposition parties have actually said that this is this direction of the. Well, ECI, if I might add, and if they actually have to do it beginning May 1st, all these two measures also, they will again have to get their act together and get a whole lot of machines and people again. And every time some change is made, you have to realize that people are being trained. Because they're the same electoral officers we get from all the places, the teachers, the government officials, and various people. So they have to be retrained. And in the middle of an election cycle, as big as the general elections, it will take quite a lot of effort again.
So, with the opposition agreeing mostly, and with the Supreme Court agreeing, and the EC also getting all the support it can, rather than as Churchill said, rather than the little man lining up in the long queue under the hot sun to put his little cross on a little piece of paper and shoving it into the sealed ballot box, we have the little man doing all that just to press a button.